Joseph, over there, over there. Okay, cool. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, gosh, let me get, Steve, would you? Okay, thank you. All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this meeting of the Small Business Development Committee to order at this time. And before we get started, I've asked Chairman Tolver to do an invocation. So please.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for this time here, and we ask that you would lead, guide, and direct in all that we do, and any decisions we make now or in the future would be for the best of the citizens of Georgia. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chairman Tolver. This is a presentation. Joseph Cortez and I met in the hall a few days ago, I guess a few weeks ago, and we talked about the industry that he represents. And he was kind enough to decide to not only make a presentation, but also to show us the product of their hard labors. And so we're going to have an informational meeting and presentation at this time. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, yeah. That's. Hey.
Now you're having a meeting.
Now thank you, Chairman Tolver. I expect to hear about that tomorrow morning on your report on the journals of the previous legislative day. To found them correct and probably a little dizzy at the same time. But anyway, with that being said, so this is to bring light on your industry. And being a small business person myself, I appreciate all your hard work and labors. And so, Joseph, if you would please, I guess you can go to that microphone right there, introduce yourself, and talk a little bit about your industry. And I'm going to let you introduce the members of your. Okay. You need this?
I think I can remember them all.
Okay. Get that piece of paper. There you go. That should have some of them. Anyway, and then give us an overview and then talk about your industry.
Well, Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity. I will keep it high level and brief. I know you'd love to hear from our brewery, small business owners from across the state here. We're really excited about the cross-section of folks we have. I'd love to tell you a story just about the growth of our industry. That really has been brought about by some smart policy decisions from folks like yourselves. I think maybe some of you were around for some of those steps forward that we've taken for small breweries and really the industry as a whole over the past several years. I'll start by a very high-level overview. And just to clarify, we were happy to provide samples at the request of the chairman. So we just to clarify there. In 2022, I think my mic went off. Are we good? In 2022, Georgia had roughly, and I say roughly because it's a little bit of a tough number to track. You know, you have brewery openings and closures like any small businesses and different licenses and that open and whatnot. There was roughly 171 breweries, which is a good sign of growth. But there were also 2.2 breweries per capita, which actually ranks 44th in the nation. So it's a sign of growth, but there's also a sign of some growing pains there for our small breweries and how we can really grow as an industry in Georgia. The economic impact was over $1.9 billion in the state. We produced as a craft segment over 500,000 barrels. And just to give you an indication of scale there, that's a good amount of beer. That's a lot of beer, over 500,000 barrels of craft produced in the state. But our friends who have a great business up the road in Cartersville, Georgia, one of their facilities, Anheuser-Busch, they brew about 8 million barrels of beer annually just in Cartersville, Georgia. Of course, they're a big multinational business. They do great, serve the Cartersville community very well. So they brew a lot of beer there. But just to give you an idea of scale. That has risen, obviously, over the past several years. In 2015, there were 45, roughly, craft breweries. And again, thanks in large part to policy choices by members of the General Assembly, that number grew to 155 in 2021, and then as you heard, 171 in 2022. Despite the growth, there are still significant challenges and barriers to success for small breweries. due to some antiquated policies, which I'm sure our small breweries owners here would love to expound upon a little bit. And we still rank in the back of the pack in terms of that new brewery licenses per capita. So we haven't reached, you hear a lot about brewery saturation. Some of these states, if you go to Asheville, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting a brewery. But for the most part, that really hasn't happened in Georgia yet. We've taken some great steps forward, but there are those challenges. You'll hear a lot of talk about the three-tier system, which is a very important part of the legacy of the system of alcohol distribution in Georgia. Certainly a part that many of our breweries around the state have built up to scale and done very successful with. In fact, our wholesale distributor partners. And it should be a partnership. And in many cases it is. This is not an either-or scenario for our industry and for our small businesses. What we're looking for is more flexibility and not what has too often been a part of the three-tier system, a straitjacket rather than a flexible system that enables small businesses to thrive. And we'll get into that a little bit more. I know our brewery owners here will talk a little bit more about that. But we believe that we can take some additional small steps forward that would give these folks the flexibility they need to not just survive, but thrive. And we see a lot of breweries closing over the past year. None of them closed for any one single reason. But if you don't think that, along with all of the business challenges that every small business faces in Georgia, if outdated regulations didn't play an impact, we believe they did. And we'd love to continue to share that story and to continue to build up the industry for everyone. Again, this is not an either or. This is not either we have wholesalers or we don't. They're a great part of building up the brand. We just think that we can give some opportunity for folks to get out into the market where they can't right now. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You said in 2022 there was 171.
Roughly, yes, sir.
Didn't you say 2 point what per capita? What did you say?
2.4 per capita.
2.2 what? I mean, I'm missing.
2.2 breweries per capita. Per 100,000, just to be per 100,000 21 plus adults.
I've got you now.
Yes, thank you.
More people. And,
No.
And you had out of craft brewers, you brewed 7 3/4 million gallons. Is that right?
Over 500,000, 558,362 in 2022 barrels. I'm sorry. Yes.
Close to 8 million gallons. 15
Correct.
and a half.
Correct.
That's a lot of beer.
It's a lot of beer. It's for sure. But if you break that down, you know, how much I think for our small businesses, the sky should be the limit for how much they can succeed.
One other quick question: do the craft brewers, for the most part, just run their label, or do they run for other people? Are they commissioned or?
Mainly in Georgia, you're running your label, but there is such thing as contract brewing, where a brewery can and that in itself, there's a lot of red tape.
In other words, they run their label plus do some contract brewing.
In rare circumstances, there's some contract brewing.
Thank you.
Yeah, Joseph, thank you so much for being here. Thank you guys I quote, you said it hasn't happened in Georgia yet. My question is, why hasn't it happened in Georgia yet? And my other question is, why did they close? Two basic, simple questions.
Well,
Thank you.
why did breweries that closed?
Yeah, you said.
Well, I think breweries that closed could give you a better idea. I think there's always a multitude of reasons. You've been a small businessman. We have small business folks on the committee and in this building that know that it's a challenging environment to run any small business, especially hospitality business. But I think folks that are hopefully here to stay and have a thriving business will share some of those challenges that absolutely impacts closures. And we can't say that they don't. So the challenging regulations that make it very hard still in Georgia to get your product out to market, especially if you're a small brewery, to build up to scale, to serve your local community. There's still a lot of really, really tight regulations that mandate certain relationships that don't actually serve the small brewer for them to actually build up to scale. And if they want to get in the shelves, for example, on Kroger or across the state and traditional retailers, they're going to go with the experts and valuable wholesale partners to do that. But as of now, it's more of a cajole, and at this point, it's almost become more of a single monopoly than an actual three-tiered, even-keeled system.
think the other question, why hasn't, and maybe you answered it, why hasn't it happened in Georgia yet?
Why has not? I'm sorry, just to
I-
clarify.
I'm just quoting
Representative.
what you just said, that it has not happened in Georgia yet. My question is why? Maybe you answered it. You answered it? Okay. Regulation.
Well, saturation is a relative thing. I could give a definition of saturation. You could have a completely different definition. If you go to the west side of Atlanta, folks would argue that there's a pretty good saturation of breweries there. You know, you have probably about 10 to 13. I believe one or so is closed, so 10 to 13 breweries just in the west side of Atlanta. That's a pretty good, tight, but breweries, and we have a couple here that have opened in small, kind of far-flung, exurban and suburban towns, rural towns. There's a brewery that just opened in Moultrie recently. So we're starting to see that opening, but again, it's a very challenging environment because we've opened up what SB 85 did, which has allowed breweries for the first time ever to actually serve a pint in their own tap room of their own beer. That opened the gates for folks to open their brewery and their business, but it kept the ceiling relatively low. Compared to, for example, 40 other states allow for limited self-distribution for, in many cases, small breweries, in a couple cases, all breweries, and they still have a very, very thriving system. I can count over 10 breweries that have closed over this past year. I can't think of, and I'd love for our wholesaler friends to let me know of one wholesaler that's gone out of business as a result of these reforms.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you guys being here. I'm from up in Blue Ridge. You know where Blue Ridge is at? Yeah. You heard of Grumpy Old Men, or trying to think of some of the other ones. Buckbald Brewery.
Fannin.
We got, yeah. Oh, cool. So, but now you're limited now. You're capped on the number of kegs or barrels or that you can sell?
Not that you can put it for a brewery license. You can put out as much into the market as you want, which is great if you can get to that point. And we have several craft folks who have been able to build their business up to scale. Most were around pre-SB 85, right? They were able to get the capital investment to start really, really strong, typically a couple $1 million to do that, which is not the story of every small business that starts in small towns. And they have done quite well and have wonderful relationships with great wholesale partners. But that's, again, it's not a one-size-fits-all scenario for our small businesses, just like in any of your industries that you probably work in. It's not a one-size-fit-all, and we shouldn't have those regulations that are one-size-fits-all for every single brewery.
Thank you, Chairman. So my small city of Ringgold, my hometown, is actually getting its first brewery. And so we're very excited. And so I'm asking specifically, what can I go back and tell them that we're working on to make sure that they have a very easy path forward to being a very successful small business? Because my town's really trying to match around that. So I want to make sure that we're doing everything I can to make sure that's successful. Thank you.
Well, Representative Horner and Chairman, I know this is not a hearing on a bill, but you asked the question, so I'll just say we do have a bill. There's a Senate bill and there's also a House bill that's out there that we've had this biennium. The Senate bill we've had some action on, a hearing on a couple of weeks ago, Senate Bill 163 in the Senate Regulated Industries Committee. There were some robust testimonies you can imagine and debate. We've been working very hard with folks over in the Senate side and bringing I think almost every day we've had a small brewery owner, and what that does, to answer your question very directly, it allows for some limited self-distribution. And we've been working with folks. We've opened up the conversation with the wholesaler representatives in the Capitol to see if we can work with those folks on helping the new small brewery that's going to open to give them a little bit more flexibility. So limited self-distribution. That number has changed a little bit in that Senate bill based on some committee subs, but we'd love to have a conversation of what works best for most of our folks. It also initially reformed some of the franchise laws in Georgia. So right now we contend that it's a pretty one-sided system of franchise laws. There are a few ways that you can get out, and sometimes breweries do get out, but most breweries, typically on an annual basis, are not able to get out of their contract. If other brands, typically wine brands, that there are a multitude of in Georgia, those are typically folks who get out of that there's only one voluntary release. This is how I'll sum up that relationship. There are a few different ways. One of them is for cause. I know my friend Martin here can help me remember all the different ways. One of them is for cause, where you have to go through a very lengthy process with the Department of Revenue, which would typically drain most small businesses. And another is voluntary release. Except there's only one party that can voluntarily release the other under Georgia's franchise laws and the manufacturer-distributor relationship. And that's the distributor. And we don't think that's fair. So we have proposed, although we have the current version of the Senate bill substitute that we've had, we've moved back on that, but we'd love to continue to have the conversation on that and how that would help your small brewery in Ringgold. And then right now there's a daily cap in Georgia, off-premise, so really to go, what you can go in and take with you to go, of 288 ounces per person per day. That equates roughly to one case of 12-ounce six-packs, right? One case of 12-ounce six-packs, which does sound great, and for most folks that works, but in a lot of cases, Alabama, for example, about 3 years ago, tripled their limit. So they are now triple the limit. Every other state except for South Carolina has a higher daily off-premise limit or no limit. And why do they do that? Is because they know that that stimulates tourism. That stimulates folks who want to, when they're going through Asheville or when they're going through Nashville, all the villas up north and around us are hubs of folks stopping and getting to, like, I want to get a couple cases for the lake this weekend or going to the beach or whatever. The same thing happens in Georgia. Folks want to go up to Athens. There's a few great breweries there for game weekend. They want to take, a few cases back home with them to Atlanta or wherever. They can't do it now. We're the lowest in the southeast of bordering states except for South Carolina. Again, Alabama tripled theirs. So we've asked to raise that. Give our folks a fighting chance to compete with bordering states as people are driving down I-16 and through Savannah and down I-95. There's some great breweries in Savannah and in coastal Georgia, where I'm sure folks would like to load up the back of their car and go down to the beach. And it's not about safety, because you can pull your truck up to a liquor store right now and fill it with a pallet of vodka, which is a lot higher proof than any beer that any of these folks are brewing in Georgia. So 3 cases is not about public safety. It's not about health. Unfortunately, it's become more about control, and we just want to give these folks a little bit more flexibility in their business.
And you said there's a House bill?
There's a House Bill 407.
Who's carrying the House bill?
Representative Tyler Paul Smith. TP.
Cool. All right, we're going to get one more question, and then we're going to let our local brewers come.
Mm-hmm.
All right, number 9, is that you?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, sir. First of all, who's from Brazelton? Well, good to know you. I represented that whole area, basically Flowery Branch, Lanier Islands. How about Bainbridge? Okay, my wife's down there at her grandparents' now, so good deal. I'll make sure we look you up. We started, and you might have covered this, with a growler that you could take your bottle back and have a refill. My dad thought it was like going and getting root beer. So he always had a growler. He would go to a certain place made root beer that was very good. And then we went to, a little bit further down the road to where you could have a 12-pack. So we made progression here, but basically in the bill, 407 and 163, are they the same bill that's mirrored together? And what is the main thing they're trying to do is just have, from a case, 288 ounces? Or are they trying to double that capacity or triple it, or what?
We've, Representative Donahue, thank you for the question. We've had a few different versions of the Senate bill, a couple different subs. We've tried to, because, for the objective for us is to work with folks who want to compromise under this, under the Gold Dome and partners of all sorts. So we've tried to float a few different possibilities on the Senate side there. I think we initially asked for to take, remove that, what we believe is an arbitrary cap. I think 3 of the bordering states don't even have a cap. Let the market control that. Folks can only fit what they can for personal consumption anyways, if they're going to go to the lake house or whatever. I think our current Senate bill has, as I mentioned, raised it to 3 cases from 1. Actually, I'm sorry. I've been saying 3. It's 1440 ounces, which is 5 cases. So I keep thinking about Alabama because I don't know that we want to be behind Alabama or really match Alabama.
And when we first started this dilemma, basically Anheuser-Busch said we would put them out of business, and Miller, and that was kind of comical. But we've watched it grow, so competition should always be good. So I mean, I have no problem with it. Who's behind not really wanting to see it besides the big guys, the big players?
I'm sorry, say that last part one more time.
Who's really wanting to not allow this? I mean, we have a Senate carry 163. Who's carrying it in the Senate?
Chairman Hufstetler.
That's a good one, yeah. Okay.
The only way I can answer your question is I think you might hear from some folks who may have a different perspective in the room.
Oh,
they
that's
can,
fine.
They could probably
That's
answer
fine.
better than I can
Right.
on who and why and
Well,
yeah.
good deal. Well, thank you. Thank you, sir.
Let me say what our posture is now is we want to hear from the local brewers. We want to hear your story. And just to make sure we've got enough time, what we're going to do is, guys and gals, members of the committee, can we hold the questions until... I wanted to hold the rest of the questions until afterwards, and we can talk one-on-one with each of the presenters. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Dollar. All right. Who do you want to go first?
Would you like me to just introduce them all and then go one by one?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chairman. I will start down here with Kevin. And Kevin, remind me your last name again. I don't know. Irvin. Kevin Irvin. That's right. Kevin Irvin with Atlantucky, and they'll tell you more about themselves. They'll come up here and give a brief introduction. And I don't want to just do it that way. Why don't y'all just come up here, introduce yourselves to the committee, save some time. Yeah.
Thank you, Joseph. The chairman, representatives, thank you so much for your time. My name is Kevin Irvin. I represent Atlantucky Brewing. We're located here in Atlanta, Georgia, about a mile from this location. We've been open for 2 years. We're right on Northside Drive, 170 Northside Drive, stone's throw away from Mercedes-Benz nestled in Castleberry Hill. You would think that with that location, we would have great foot traffic from all the sports teams and things like that. Well, one thing we've learned is that's based off of whether they win or they lose. So our soccer teams drink before games regardless. Our football teams drink after the game if they won. So we're hoping that we can start to see a little bit better foot traffic with that. As far as breweries go, we have a 1-barrel system. That's on the very small side. Most breweries have a 5-barrel system. With that, we brew twice a day, so we're a whole staff of 7 people, being a small business. I'm the operations manager who also pours beer, cleans windows, gives tours and everything all the things with a small business. One thing that is important with us with a small business is to be able to grow. With that, being able to get our beer out to different people. And what I say is I come from an operations background. I love beer, but mine is more looking to operations. And getting into distribution puts us to fight for a finite amount of space in spaces. So we have to compete with your Sweetwater 420s and very popular beers to be able to get into that space, already being a small brewery. So we're hoping to be able to have that option to just, get brewery in our county, in our area, just to get more people excited about what we're trying to build and give us an opportunity as a small business to continue to thrive. We're in that place of do we go distribution or not? And, a lot of this is, based off of how we can grow as a small business, being one of the smaller 1-barrel systems. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you, sir.
Hi, thanks for your service. My name is Chris Lauer. I am the founder and owner and do everything he mentioned except brewing up in Ball Ground, Georgia. The name of our brewery is called Rock Solid, and as you might know, it's where all the Georgia marble comes from. And so our bar is made of marble. So we are a 7-barrel system, so we're a little bit larger. We've been in business 3 years, so we started in December 2020. We waited 6 months to open. I also do payroll, and we currently have about 8 people every week that I employ. I have 2 other partners, and they work full-time, and I used to work full-time, but this became a full-time job after about a year. We have a really good position in the community. ever since we even started talking to the city manager in Ball Ground, they were 100% behind us. And the motto in Ball Ground is we roll out the red carpet, not the red tape. And it's true. So after about a year, they cleared out a location right next to the building that we rent. They cleared it out because it was full of marble, as everything else is in that town, and made it into a parking lot for us, which was really nice. So there's a lot of community support. Every Friday morning, the Ball Ground Business Club meets in our brewery at 10 a.m., even though we're not open, because we're the biggest space in town. And a lot of the events that happen in that town happen around the brewery. We're right on, I don't know if you know it, but 372, which is where all the chicken trucks go back and forth, all day and night long. So we're right there, and the whole community, comes out. This past Friday, we finally got a lobster food truck to come all the way up to Ball Ground, and I mean, it was listed in the neighborhood newsletters all around Ball Ground that there was going to be a lobster truck. So we're a huge part of the community, and I would just say that I think that has made the difference. We did have a distributor for about a year and a half, and that they dropped us because we were too small. So now, for instance, you were asking about, kind of what would make the difference. If there's a festival in the park, which is across the street, we cannot get our beer across the street. If there's a little, thing down the two blocks away, we can't, or the barbecue place, we can't get our beer we were talking about the ounces. So, for instance, there's I think 3 or 4 wedding venues in Ball Ground, and in order for them to get our beer, they have to send 3 or 4 people down to each purchase the limit, and we can the beer then ahead of time for them. So that, that's not convenient for them. It doesn't really work out for us. So it would be useful to have a law that limited distribution, offered us limited distribution. Yeah, absolutely. Ooh.
First, thank you all for hearing us today. We certainly appreciate it. My name's Curtis Dale. I go by Chip, my nickname. And just so you don't ask, my middle initial is not N. So I'm with Brazelton Brewing in Brazelton, Georgia. We've been opened about 5 years. Opened it up because I've been a home brewer for about 30 years. And my background is finance and accounting. And I got sick of sitting in Atlanta traffic, and I wanted to try to do something different. My wife suggested, why don't you use your hobby as something? And so we started looking, and we were very fortunate to luck into a space in downtown Brazelton. If you're familiar with downtown Brazelton, the old cotton gin that the Brazelton brothers used to use to process cotton from cotton farmers nearby. I worked with the owner on that. We retrofitted the building. It's about 110 years old. Thank goodness we got help from the Georgia Department of Community Affairs with some loans to help us get going, so that was certainly nice. And the representative from Ringgold area, that was going to be one of the things I would recommend to him, is make sure you tap into all the government resources that you can to try to do that. Our loan was called the Downtown Development Revolving Loan Fund, which was designed and set up for old historic communities like Brazelton to reestablish itself. And through the course of making the decision to open the place up, my wife and I did a lot of travel. And the Pacific Northwest, Colorado in particular, are kind of the birthplace of craft beer industries, and we traveled up there a lot, and we made it a point to stop at local breweries, brew pubs, and we really loved the vibe and the feel that we got from those kind of places, and felt that the town of Brazelton would really benefit by having a place like that that would bring people back into the downtown area, not only for our business, but for all the other businesses that were there as well. When you open up in Georgia, you got to make a decision whether you're a brewery or brew pub. We chose brew pub, and we did that because it was very important for me to have a kitchen and serve food. The breweries that open up, they can have food, but it's usually from a food truck or someone ordering in. It was important to me to offer a place where families can come and serve their kids food and drink a beer along those lines. Some of the challenges that we faced, obviously, we talked about the hospitality business. With the economy where it is, the hospitality industry is one of the first places that families cut. Limited resources, so they don't go out to eat. They don't go out and get a beer. We've seen that impact us the last 2 years. On the flip side of that, we've seen the impact of higher prices. Our food prices are significantly higher than they were 3 years ago. Our beer ingredient prices are significantly higher than they were 3 years ago. So those push and contract on what our bottom line could be, and I'm very conscious of raising prices to cover those increases in our food costs. So we've seen our margins slip a little bit for that, but I'd much rather get people in the door and have them happy than to charge them $20 for a burger, for example. Chris mentioned it very well. The wholesaler opportunity is a challenge for us. As a brew pub, we can only distribute 10% of what we make. So I've got a cap on how much I can distribute. We'd like to be able to distribute more, and particularly to events like Brazelton Antique Fest, which are in April and October. Fundraising events at Chateau Elan. We can't participate in those because we can't get our beer there. So limited opportunity, particularly for an organization like ours. We're a 5-barrel system. We brew maybe 350 barrels a year. We're just not big enough for wholesalers to care about us. 350 barrels a year, yeah. And you extrapolate that, that's only 35 barrels that I can distribute. And the current wholesale relationship we had, we were only distributing about 18. So we were leaving beer on the table, so to speak, and being able to do that. So again, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it. Be around for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Hello, thank you everybody for having me here today. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Gallagher Dempsey. I'm the owner and operator of Southern Philosophy Brewing Company in Bainbridge, Georgia. My business is very similar to what Chip just described. We produce under 300 barrels. We also utilize the DDRLF program through the Department of Community Affairs when we opened. We've been open almost 5 years. My wife and one child at the time, we were actually living in Florida. I'm from North Florida, and we were deciding, okay, where are we going to start our brewery? And I chose from 5 different locations, and I chose Bainbridge, Georgia, because I saw opportunity there. I saw that it was a quaint community, small town, good for families, and there was, frankly, a lot of potential. We've seen just a tremendous revitalization in that town, in our town, and we've been very happy to be a part of it. Again, a lot of what Chip said, we experience the same things with the prices and the business and the economy and everything else. So I'll just I won't talk too much about that. I will say that we've been fortunate. We've had great success, but there's also been being an entrepreneur and having the entrepreneurial spirit. I haven't been able to do everything that I've wanted to do with my business, and I would also say I want to go back on I'm a brew pub license as well, and our initial model was we wanted to do a brewery, and we started working on licensing and everything, and we figured out, well, and after my family had already moved, we bought the property. Well, this just isn't going to work with a small brewery with the current laws that we have. So we moved forward. Everything's been great. We do have a kitchen as well, but wanting to expand the business, the vision of that with the laws that we have in Georgia have been difficult because you essentially have to scale like 10x or more if you're going to try to make any money off distribution through a distributor. And so my son will be eating at the restaurant next door sometimes. They say, "Dad, why isn't your beer, why don't they sell your beer here?" I said, "Well, son, it's very complicated." But it would be, as an entrepreneur, wouldn't it be nice for us to be able to sell our product, to make that extra product, to hire 2 or 3 more people, to increase the tax revenue for the state by selling that product to the restaurant next door, the pub down the street. And why it's not working right now is because nothing against the distributors. The distributors have a great role to play, but you see, if they're coming from Valdosta or Albany or Atlanta all the way down to Bainbridge, and I can only give them 10 or 30 kegs a month, say, they're going to kind of forget about us, right? And they're going to have to go back to their bonded warehouse and then come back to Bainbridge and sell it to the businesses in our community. So, another thing is that we're 15 minutes from Florida and we're 30 minutes to Alabama. So, I have the funding and the financing to expand in another facility. So with the laws that we have now, do I want to go to Florida or Alabama because there's a better system in place to expand my business? For instance, the 3-tier system that Joseph mentioned earlier, I can't just open a production facility. Now I have a brew pub license, and I'd have to open up another brew pub that had more brewing capacity. So there's a barrier there. Well, I could cross the state lines, open up a production facility. But we would rather do it in Georgia. So these are things that, as Joseph mentioned, there's 40 states that have limited self-distribution, and we would, certainly ask that you all talk to your colleagues and push for this to help us. Yeah, and the brew pub limit, just to clarify that, as a brew pub, we're in a unique license where the Department of Revenue, they place us in the retail tier. So there's a manufacturing, distribution, and retail tier. And they put us in the retail tier, but we actually have some manufacturing that happens. And for instance, the license allows up to 10,000 barrels of beer to be manufactured by a brew pub license for distribution. So it's something where that license, it exists, but without having the flexibility to really, distribute, it's something that we could really use help with. So, yeah. I don't know what to say. So, anyway, I think I touched on most of everything, and I'll give the opportunity to Chris to speak. So, thank you all.
I promise I'll only take a couple of minutes. Chairman, members, thanks for having us. I have seen some of you with a much different hat on, a suit, a tie. I used to be a partner at a large consulting firm, and I left about a year ago in hopes of starting a small business. I think it's helpful to know my story and kind of, why I wanted to do this, try not to repeat some of the things that my colleagues have shared. I grew up in a farming family in Oregon, driving combine, picking zucchini, strawberries, and all I wanted to do was get away from it. And so I did that for about 30 years of my life, and then all I wanted to do was get back. And when I say get back to something that, helped me get some red clay under my fingernails. I've lived in Georgia since 2003. And I knew what I was getting into. Representative Hilton, when I was working with him on the Georgians First Commission, he said, you can't make a good presentation without a prop. So I brought like 5 or 6. I knew what I was getting into. I knew that there was a lot of red tape in Georgia. And I also read this book about craft breweries in cities. I visited over 1,000 breweries across the country. And I've sat down on the other side of the bar from people like this, and that's what made me want to do it. I saw the way it brings communities together. I saw what it was like to be a brewery owner, and I also knew how hard it was going to be. This book is really cool because it talks about how breweries change towns. It's written by a professor who is a sociologist out at the University of San Diego, Julie Wortel, who's actually going to be speaking at our brewery on April 18th, if any of you are interested. So I knew what I was getting into. I knew it was going to be hard. But I didn't know it was going to be this hard. I actually have two businesses. I have an olive oil company, and I'm one of the owners of Frog Rock Brewing Company in Austell, Georgia. We're the newest brewery. We opened August 5th of this past year. We're right in downtown Austell. If you're a historian, we're right across from the old Sweetwater Creek Hotel. It's now a Burger King, if you're familiar with Austell. But we're single-handedly revitalizing the city. If you walk into our bar right now, you probably see every single one of the members of the Austell City Council sitting at our bar, probably talking a little politics and poking each other about the day's activities. So the olive oil business and the beer business could not be more different. It's so easy to get this oil from another country. I have 3 groves in Tuscany, Italy, bottle it, sell it everywhere. No one asked me any questions. Well, I have some licenses, but this product here, we're on a 2-barrel system as well. So we don't brew 2 batches a day like our colleagues at Atlantucky, but we will probably do 300 to 400 barrels depending on demand. So we employ 5 people. We have a goal to double that. And we also have a goal to provide health insurance for each of our employees. It's something we can't do yet based on the size. I know the representative who had to leave asked a question about, small breweries and what does it take to be successful. It's impossible to get a bank loan to open a brewery right now. And to open a brewery of our size, you maybe can ask some of my fellow brewers here, but it takes about $150,000 to open a brewery of our size, which means you're going to your family and your friends to get loans, and then you got to pay them back. It's unlikely our brewery will make a profit and be, in the black and profitable for at least 2 years based on those business loans in kind that we've been given by folks. The most striking thing I've experienced, and very different from my life in the corporate world where I could generally get small businesses to call me back and help, or if they reached out to me, I'd find a way to, to mentor them. I worked on the Georgia Mentor Protege Connection Program, mentored a lot of small businesses. The distributors in Georgia do not exercise that kind of support for small businesses in Georgia. I'm going to give you some really specific examples to bring it home for you. I have 3 restaurants right next to me who want to carry our beer. And I've tried to reach out to distributors, and they won't call us back. Just last week, we got the call we've been waiting for. Six Flags called us back and said, hey, we wouldn't mind carrying your beer this summer. And we met with them. We had a meeting. They tried all our beer. They said, we love it. And we both know in our heart of hearts that we have no way to get them beer right now. Either through their pushing their distributor to call us back or us reaching out and finding a distributor to carry our beer. It's crazy. And I'm a supporter of the 3-tier system. We actually need it to work. But if you go to any shelf right now, this is what's happening in Georgia. Just to give you a perspective, if you go to a shelf right now to store, 4 out of every 5 beers on that shelf will likely be from North Carolina. So we're sending revenue, because of our laws, we're sending revenue outside of our state to North Carolina. Now Florida's coming for us. Florida is growing faster than North Carolina is. But it's because they have more breweries, more flexibility. They can bring more money in to develop all these really cool beers that that we all like to brew and have fun with. So thanks for your time, and hopefully you'll let them ask some questions.
Well, cool. Thank you all for your presentation. Martin, did you want to say anything today? No? Okay. All right. Well, cool. What I'd like to do now is recess the meeting so we can, what are these questions? Okay. Well, I was thinking, do you want to do the questions, or you want to do the questions individually with the, it's open?
It doesn't matter. I wanted to understand what we were talking about, but that's fine. I mean, it's a pretty complicated situation.
It is.
If we're gonna, that's
Why don't, as I said, why don't we just take a break and try some of your wares, and if you have questions, you can talk with the individuals, and we go from there, if that's okay. Is that all right with you guys? Let's do it.
Drink some beer. And ask questions, yeah.
Hey, good job, guys.
Thanks.
I just want to quickly apologize for my tardiness, running late from another meeting, both to the chairman, rest of the committee, as well as our guests. Excuse me for my tardiness. What you do here and you coming to testify before us and advocate for your causes is very admirable, so I take it seriously, and excuse me. Thank you.
Chairman, any of these folks, some of their beers here, some other folks' beer as well, they can answer questions pretty much about any of it. So.
There we go. All right. Members of the committee, can I get your attention real quick, like? Yeah. Bill, Ray. Yeah. Members of the committee, House Services needs to be able to cut off everything. So instead of recessing, we're just going to go ahead and adjourn if that's okay. Meeting adjourned.